I'd like to start by asking both of you, how much of Marcos Jr.'s high election preference ratings today do you think can be attributed to organized disinformation campaigns that his side runs? Maybe I'll start with Professor Fatima.
All right. That's a very difficult question, John, to answer, especially that we know that this information has been happening for years now. And from Cleve's research, we know, for instance, that, this information or, the rehabilitation of the image of Marcos Sr. has been happening in Ilocos at least for, decades now. And only now the more contemporary version of manifestation of it is what we're seeing online. I think to answer this question, what I want to emphasize is that this information does two things. First, apart from telling you what to believe in, the false narrative, the distorted information that is shared to you about Marcos Jr. for instance, it's really the potency of this information is its capacity to cultivate a schema, or in simple words, it's a way of thinking, it's a lens to seeing the world. And having studied this information, especially in the context of historical revisionism, of the Marcos regime, and more contemporary examples of Marcos Jr. Using this apparatus, I can say that while vote preference is not necessarily something you can attribute to this information, it really is priming the audience to rationalize these lies and distortions, and ultimately, and I think more potently, it's about empathizing with Marcos Jr. I know it's ridiculous to hear that, but if Marcos Jr. claims to be a victim of a big cover up, and all of the things that he claims to be, then perhaps people who've been exposed to this information about his father, his family, and his own political career would probably feel sorry for him for being this victim, right? So I think it's not a matter of measurement, because I think the effect is exponential. If you invest a lot from the very beginning, it would just give you a lot of return of investment, especially in 2022.
Thank you. Professor Cleve, let me ask you the same unfair question. But I really just wanted to introduce the topic. How much do you think of Marcos's high ratings can be attributed to this information?
Yes. Hi, John, and hi, Fatima. I think I would agree with Fatima here that I would attribute that one of the significant reasons why Marcos Jr. is leading right now is really because of the organized disinformation campaign. And we know that this is 6 years in the making, if you will, that the family, the Marcos family, is really invested so much on the disinformation machinery that now that they only enjoying the benefits, reaping the benefits of that particular investment. This is, I know that this is a contentious position because if you look at the literature on disinformation, scholars are still saying that we are not really able 100% to attribute, for example, election outcomes on disinformation. And this is mainly, these claims, for example, are mainly the results of studies on the 2016 and 2019 elections. But I think the way that disinformation campaigns have evolved from 2016 to 2019 to now the 2022 elections, I think it's becoming its significance on the actual election outcome and actual election preference is actually becoming more and more significant. For example, back in 2016 and 2019, for example, I'm part of those disinformation researchers, for example, who would say that disinformation may contribute to the rise of Rodrigo Duterte, it may also have contributed to his electoral victory, but it couldn't really explain his the election outcome. But right now, for example, it's definitely an empirical question. It demands critical and scholarly scrutiny. But because we want to understand what's happening now, my suspicions is based on what I hear on the ground about why people, for example, are not voting for example, the vice president. And if you talk to ordinary voters, I've seen videos. I've also done my own interviews with ordinary voters. And you'd actually hear that the some of the things that are quite popular in the disinformation machine, some of the things that were made popular by the Marcos disinformation machinery, for example, Lenny Lugaw, Lenny Lutang, for example, these were actually also um, part of the reasons and part of the information that voters on the ground are using on why they prefer Marcos Jr. now more than the other candidates. For example, things like the legacy of the Marcos family, supposedly their investments in infrastructure, their gold, for example, that they are a victim of the Aquino family, for example. These are all narratives that were made popularized online by the um, Marcos disinformation machinery, and that when we hear it on the ground, when we hear from voters themselves saying that these were their considerations and that these are the things that they know, these are the information that they've considered in choosing who to vote for the president, then I think we are on firm ground here in saying that a big part really of why Marcos Jr. is leading presently is this organized disinformation campaign.